What is up, Titans? Welcome to a brand new recap, review, and breakdown. And this time I'm not going to say Season 2, because somehow in last week's review I said Season 2, Episode 8. But today, yes, Season 3, Episode 9. Now, today's story was an entirely separate story, of which I think will make a lot of people happy. Some people I know don't enjoy some takeout moments like this from a series, but obviously with certain characters this season so far being left in the lurch a little bit, such as Raven, I think more people will be happy than displeased, because we really needed to get to Raven, what the heck she was doing on Themyscira, and this episode felt quite a lot more linear. Like, there wasn't so many things going on, it was just divided into two little segments of Raven on Themyscira with her training, trying to resurrect Donna Troy, but also obviously the Underworld stuff. I've mixed feelings on this episode. I like a lot of aspects of it, but there are a few little things in there which I just kind of felt like, but this doesn't make sense, and we'll talk about that when we get to that. And I've got a few theories as to where things could go as well, because, hey, I haven't seen episode 10, so I can theorize again in this video. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this breakdown. You can help me out by giving a like if you do go on to enjoy the video. I'd really appreciate that, as it does help share the video out there a little bit more. And make sure you remember to subscribe, because believe it or not, most people who come back to channels and videos aren't actually subscribed to the videos, and a lot of you aren't, so double check. Now, at first, I was quite confused, just because it opens with this wide shot, and I thought, oh, is this Themyscira? But no, I really don't think it is. We get to see where Bruce has exiled himself to. I like to imagine this kind of little castle on the hill is something to do with the Waynes, or like their family history, because they've been a wealthy family for many generations. And I'm not saying this is like a whole other country. I mean, it could be, but regardless, the reason why it's not in Themyscira, the shots that we got of Themyscira, well, A, it just doesn't make sense for Bruce to just be there. Also, bringing in his lawyer who's handling his last will and testament, like, to bring him to Themyscira. So before anyone says this is Themyscira, there's so many things going against that, it just wouldn't make sense. This is somewhere where Bruce has really come to reckon with the feelings that he has after killing the Joker. And one thing I will say is, I really do praise Ian Glenn, because the look in his face is truly the look of that of a broken Bruce Wayne. It's going to be interesting to see the discourse with what happens at the end of the episode with regards to the suicide attempt, because I didn't know how to feel about that initially, but I have come out the other side, and I've got a firm opinion on that. And I'm not going to talk about that until we get to it, but clearly Bruce Wayne is a broken man. He's done the one thing he's held off from doing for decades, as in plural. Literally, this man has been Batman for a while. Memes aside, because I know a lot of you like to poke the Alfred memes, because we know he's been Batman for a while, but no, seriously, I like seeing a continuation of Bruce after he left Dick at Wayne Manor saying be a better Batman, and he just fled. We don't know where he's been since then. He's kind of cut himself off. He's in a very remote place, but clearly he is thinking of his way out, and he has got his lawyer there, Charles. He's a solicitor to handle his last will and testament. I read the whole thing. There's no little extra Easter eggs of information in there. I'm sure he did indeed leave everything to Dick Grayson, and Charles says, are you sure? Absolutely sure about everything you're doing. Maybe Charles was kind of vibing that Bruce, not only with the such haunted look in his eyes, was planning on doing something. It was probably meant to be offered as like, are you sure you want to maybe sign everything over to like this one person or whoever? I'm not saying it has just been left to one person, but I'm sure the solicitor is just asking after getting to know Bruce for some time. And I also like how obviously this isn't Alfred, it is his lawyer who's helping him with his last will and testament, but it obviously does, with his kind of accent, play into a little bit of the Bruce Wayne and Alfred vibes. But the next scene picks up with Raven in Themyscira. Now, personally, I really like the vibes of what they're going for here. I like the callback to the old Amazon designs, if you will, from the old kind of Teen Titans comics, because recently in Wonder Woman and stuff, the Amazonian-esque design has kind of got a bit more leathery, kind of combative look, and it looks badass, don't get me wrong, but they did used to have quite the silver look to them, even with their warrior armor down to the very gowns that we see them wearing here. So that's a really nice nod. In this moment, we see Donna Troy laid before all of these Amazons, and they are trying this ritual repeatedly to resurrect her. It has been months and months, but I'm glad that they said that this has been an ongoing ritual. And as we learn later on in the episode from the teacher, I forget her name from the top of my head, I do apologize, but she says she has seen it done before, and unfortunately it didn't even happen with her own daughter, which really sucks. But But it can be done, but the difficulty here is the ritual that they're doing wasn't responding with Donna, and it hasn't been responding for multiple months, which is why in this first scene you see a bit of Raven's demonic power. I really like that. It's kind of a bit awkward in this room where everyone's doing their thing. Raven's trying to do the extra thing, like buff everything out, so to speak. You see her eyes glow, a little of the demon mist come out, and then you see the other Amazons like, well, stick to the ritual kind of thing. Now, I do like how Raven's being called out a little bit by her teacher. I mean, there's like the more senior one, and then there's the kind of, I can't remember. So basically on my review copy, by the way, I would know the names, but like we don't get subtitles on the screen as copies, so like sometimes when it's like a 720p quality copy, the audio isn't obviously fully crisp, so that's why sometimes I miss out on little things like that. But long story short here, the main thing away from this scene is I love the Amazon training and how she's blindfolded, but then it got to a point where she didn't even need to be warned about where she was about to attack next, which was really cool because it shows kind of her Jedi reflexes, if you will. But also it sprang to a moment where she even used her demonic mist and powers as a way to defend herself from the sword whilst being blindfolded. So what they're trying to convey across screen here is not only is there development with Raven over these past few months, but there's developments on all kinds of fronts. They've taken Raven in, but clearly they're still quite wary of her demonic powers. The Amazons are very accommodating, but they're still kind of keeping Raven at a little bit of an arm's length from not wanting to dive truly into her powers and resurrect Donna, because I'm guessing they're apprehensive of if she dives into that rhythm of power that requires a resurrection. You could only imagine what kind of power that would require Raven to tap into, and she might even lose control over to a demon side. Who knows? So I get their apprehensions, they're being careful, plus they already have a way of resurrecting someone. Doesn't always work, as we learn later, as I said, with that woman's daughter, but you get the point. Now, they're just taking it slowly but surely. This next scene picks up with Tim Drake on a train, and everything is kind of black and white, and I kind of like that imagery because it's like desaturating, quite literally, symbolically, almost the life out of the screen and the lens of what we're seeing to a kind of world between worlds. You know, you're meant to kind of get off on your stop, which is meant to take you to the next point of the afterlife, but then they kind of involved all of these creative ways to include Hank, which we'll get to if you don't go to your stop. There's kind of a few iffy things that don't really add up to me, which I'm about to get to. So initially, we have the train guard. So if you're on this train in the Underworld, it seems like you're kind of all good to go, as long as you stay on there and you get your ticket punched, so to speak. You get off at your stop, you go to wherever's next for you as a soul, I guess you could say. But you can obviously jump off, but then there is like other bits which make things a bit more complicated. And life and death in the DC universe has been kind of adapted in a massive amounts of ways, and I personally like the way they're doing it here. It's both true to certain aspects and iterations of stories beforehand. At this moment though, Tim Drake is kind of freaking out because when you first die, you're not necessarily recollecting everything about your death, and he runs past none other than Donna Troy. Now, I'm not necessarily, I said I was iffy with this, it just kind of made me think, well, like, you know, Donna's been there for a lot longer than Hank and Tim, and she's still on the train. So I know, like, we're going to get into this a bit more as I keep teasing, but it's just there's some confusing aspects. Like, you know, Hank was already out there roaming like Sam or Dean Winchester, so to speak, from Supernatural, learning all of these things, and he only entered there like a few weeks ago, as of episode 3, when he died, in terms of the timeline of events. And Donna's just been there the whole time, just sat on the freaking train. It's just things like that which are a bit hard to kind of digest. I mean, for all intents and purposes, maybe she was. Maybe she was. I can't argue with that, but it just feels like something's off about it to me. Carrying along this, Donna though being Donna, and I frickin' love you, Miss Troy. I really do. Donna's honestly one of my favorite characters on the show, where I felt, until she frickin' died, she has so much potential as Wondergirl. The casting is absolutely, for no pun intended, wonderful. So seeing her again feels really, 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 really good. Now, she caught up with Tim because she is caring and she wants to know what's wrong with this kid, and she initially explains a little bit about the kind of context as to what it's like here, what it means. She uses her powers to catch up with him. I always like seeing that because I feel like whenever we've seen the capabilities of Donna, it's been used very sparingly. Now, this is when we got introduced to the Dementors, shall we say, the ghouls or the ghosts. I like to call them freaking like weird ass Dementors, like from Harry Potter. These are kind of quite creepy. They take your soul down to Hades in the Underworld, and if your soul goes down that far, then yeah, good luck getting out of there. Nobody really comes back back from that, unless you're freaking Hercules or something. I like their powers as well. It's some kind of like, you know, transparent, somewhat energy waffle that gets, I don't know why I said that, but like it's like echoed out there. As much as I liked all of that, as I just said, I did feel like there were certain moments that were contrived for the plot, because if they have an ability that sends such kind of pain in you, I guess it kind of like stabilizes your soul to stay where it is there and then, which is why we saw them in such pain at points. It just felt like they were using it when it was convenient for the plot. So in some moments, it stopped everyone in their tracks and they were like, ah! But then at the end, you had a whole bunch of them on the bridge, and yes, I am jumping to that. I just feel like I have to be critical where it is something to be a little bit dived into. And to get to the point, it's like with so many of them there, you would have thought they would be able to use their powers, but no, they just kind of let themselves get hit and they disappeared. Do you know what I mean? It's just like when you have a moment like that, when you've already established the powers of how they can disrupt you to, I mean, look how much pain Tim Drake was in, Hank and Donna at certain points, but then like when it means getting to the end of the episode, they're just like looking there, standing there creepy, not doing anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to be a party pooper, I'm just saying they have powers, they use them occasionally, then when it gets to the end of the episode where a certain point comes, the execution was just a little bit sloppy with the consistency that they set up before. And this is where the next fantastic part of the episode comes, because it's like, I couldn't figure it out before, but of course it makes freaking sense now after Hank's death, in that they're running away, we hear Bon Jovi in the car. This is what I mean with the kind of car he pulls up in, Hank, of course. It feels very Dean Winchester, it literally is like with the end of the episode, just jumping to that for a second, with the original Dove coming back, it really does feel like the hawk and dove of the underworld will be going around as the Winchester brothers, so to speak, with Hank unfortunately staying behind. So it looks like Hank didn't stay on the train either, and this is what I mean, and fair enough if you call us nitpicky or whatever, but this is what I meant with regards to how Donna has been there for a lot longer. So you're telling me when Hank got off the train, like Tim Drake, that he didn't run past Donna? Do you see what I'm trying to say there? I guess somebody out there's going to type in the comments, well, he could have jumped off a different part of the train, but do you see what I mean? It's just not extremely tight-knit. Not that every TV show or moment in a TV show needs to always be so well knit together and so airtight. It just, with this, I'm struggling to believe a few things, is all I'm trying to say. Like, Hank only arrived a few weeks ago. Donna's apparently been on the train this whole time, hasn't explored the underworld. Hank has. I just feel like he would have run into Donna Troy at some point, like Tim Drake did. I thought the scenes, though, and just seeing these characters together again was fantastic. Way before season 3 even came out, we saw scenes being filmed and uploaded by the actors from Jayla Cargo and obviously Connor Leslie, Donna Troy, and I've been looking forward to their interaction. I felt like their chemistry was very good, and I can't wait to see them out in the real world, because I feel like Miss Troy, as Tim kept calling her this episode, is going to be quite a good mentor and influence to Tim, and also obviously seeing Hank and Connor Leslie's Donna Troy back together again as two original Titans from way back in the day in San Francisco, and even Garth got brought up this episode, oof, so to speak. It's just great seeing that. But just to break up some of the underworld stuff, let's go back to Themyscira with Raven and her journey. So it got to this point of where she goes to the temple at night to see Donna's body. I think, as we were exploring earlier, it's got up into a point now where she's too impatient and she just wants to try her own way, because clearly doing this ritual for months and months and it's still having no results, well, it kind of looks like Donna isn't going to be resurrected. So once again, she tries to use her powers. The demonic mist goes over Donna and her eyes glow. Once again, she says, "Donna, come back to me," and she gets frustrated and it immediately stops because the temple door opens and the kind of older and wiser Amazon steps in. Raven's in a little bit of trouble. I kind of felt bad for her younger kind of teacher, because she is obviously in her care and under her training, and I like how far her teacher was kind of going to try and back her. And did anyone think that the Amazons in this iteration that they're basing it off, they just speak like freaking Vulcans? At least the older, wiser teacher does, from when they're presenting it from the council. You know, with the whole, given the ritual of Ordegy has been disrupted, implied the transmigration of Donna Troy's soul has been interrupted or something, and then result blah, blah, blah. Do you see what I mean by the Star Trek Vulcan reference? It just feels a little bit like that in this moment. Apparently, though, through what Raven has done, the Council has decreed, or at least through this vessel and this character saying that the soul, or like the transmigration of Donna's soul has been corrupted, so any hope for resurrection now is jeopardized. And I do like how Raven kind of jumps back a bit, because this does get into a bit of the politics as to why certain Amazons that we know, whether that is, you know, Donna Troy, who is half human, half Amazon, which is, you know, a defense I used for her death in season 2. I'm not excusing the death scene, by the way. It was ridiculous in how it came about. But the Lightning, she's not Wonder Woman. She is half human. I don't know why I'm getting into this tangent, but moving onwards anyway. But also Diana. Diana's also had a little bit of kind of home angst in the past in her stories as well. And in this moment, Raven says, I wasn't committing blasphemy. You have no proof of what I did hurt Donna or her soul's transmigration. And I kind of agree with that. Like, why are they coming to this conclusion? She eventually kind of pulls the middle finger out and is just like, I see why Donna left this place. I don't blame her. She was a hero and you all are cowards. And it's like, damn, damn. But carrying on with Hank, Donna, and Tim in the car, they have a little bit of a catch-up, so to speak. They talk about the elephant in the room, like Donna learns how Hank died through Jason. It's a little bit of a surprise in how she knew he had issues and stuff, but Hank does kind of describe the drugs. I like how they kind of use the drugs as the literal change, because it's something that we as fans have been debating about for quite some time now. So this is where they go to like Hank's little base of operations, and it seems there's another drifting soul there, Malcolm. Like, God knows when he died. He could have died a long time ago, and that's where Hank's getting all this information from. This poor guy, Malcolm, who ended up biting the dust, and we'll get to that in a second. And Hank explains that this is like a place where he can gather his thoughts, get the lay of the land, pick up intel, help people out when he can. One thing I do have to say, despite the dialogue they gave, I don't agree, and I think it doesn't really make much sense for Donna Troy not wanting to go back. That whole kind of cliffhangery scene, you know, with the continuation of Raven before we got back to it, when she was like, I don't want to go back. It's just like, why? You're not that old. You know, I get what they tried to give her through her saying things like, you think I'm happy how I went out? You know, I died at a carnival. Well, exactly. Why wouldn't you want to go back and do good in the world? And then she went on to say that we saved people, but that didn't change anything. So when I was sitting on the train, I made a decision. I want to move forward, see what's next for Donna Troy. But it's like, it doesn't make sense to me still, because in terms of what's next, wouldn't you want to know what's next in the real world, the real life? What's next for you in the underworld or going into the afterlife is nothing but, you know, heavenliness and things like that. Like, wouldn't you want to, like, go back into the real world? I just felt like this was just kind of weird. Like, I know people may think differently of it, but, you know, I feel like the one thing you'd want to do through death via the most ridiculous way in the end of season 2 is come back. Do anything to come back. Future Boba here, just to let everybody know that the sound for the next 2 or 3 minutes might be a little bit dodgy. It's not your earbuds, it's not your headphones, or it's not your TV. It is something weird with my mic, trying to figure it out, but it won't last too long. Back to the breakdown. To me, you know, if I'm being brutally honest here, it just felt like they were trying to give some melodramatic dialogue to Donna Troy, who's contemplated over her death and stuff, where it does feel like the realistic outcome would be that if she could come back, she would. And the melodrama aspect of it just being the kind of old wise crack of like, oh no, I want to see what's next for me. You know, I could go back, but even though I could and everything points to me like I should, nah, I'm just going to see what's next. It's like, I don't believe the character when she says that. Do you know what I mean? And it turned out that she was coming back anyway, so I don't really know what that was. But anyway, the ghouls arrive at the bar, and this is what I mean about the inconsistency. So as much as I found this cool, and as I said, I hate to be the guy after being, and I'm such a big fan of Titans, to point out flaws like this. I don't enjoy doing it. Malcolm in this moment gets absolutely yeeted by a ghoul, by just more or less getting touched, so to speak, and like the soul gets absorbed by the ghoul, kind of like Eclipso in Stargirl in a way. And I just thought, well, here we go again. If this is all it takes, why was it so easy at the end? And, you know, what I was kind of articulating earlier, I don't want to repeat myself with the critiques, but if that's all it took to absorb Malcolm's soul, poor guy now is stuck down in the realm of Hades, you know, Hercules style. I just picture the animation, a bunch of souls swimming in a little green pool, so to speak. If that's all it takes, you can kind of figure out my issue with it, because these ghouls were overpowered at 1 second to very underpowered few and far between the episode. But one cool thing is that the rules work a little bit differently down here, so Hank can literally like spawn guns, and you can kind of spawn things, I guess, that you really, really want, and they played a little bit of comedy with that a little bit later with how Donna got those drinks out on the bridge. I think one of them was like a reference to the drink that Garth gave her. This gunshot pulls that memory for Tim. He's starting to remember how he died, or was kind of dying. I guess that's the key thing, because in this moment, really in the real world, he was in between life and death. This is when Donna's like, okay, so when Tim's ready to travel, we're gonna take him back to the train, and he's just like, nope. No, you're not. And Hank in this moment's trying to convince her that she is needed in the real world, because, you know, what kind of use is her just staying down here and whatnot when she is a hero? She put herself between Tim and hell, so don't tell me you're done being a hero. Tim in this moment also views that all he's ever kind of wanted was to be like the heroes he's looked up to, like the Titans, but he ran in that moment and froze with Scarecrow and got shot in the back. He kind of views himself as a coward, but it's like, no, Tim, man, like, I'm pretty sure if you're unarmed and Scarecrow's got a gun, anybody would try and run. Just try and zigzag. Just don't run in a straight line, you know, because that's a bit of a TV trope, but we'll forget about that one. I do love the back and forth of Miss Troy, don't call me Miss Troy and whatnot. It really did make me smile quite a lot. Just that kind of ending, she was trying to temper his expectations, as you should when it comes to the Titans' realistic take on sidekicks and becoming a hero. If we end up back on Earth, there's no guarantee it will end up any different. He could die again or something like that, and he says, I don't need a guarantee, Miss Troy, I just need a chance. And I really do like Jayla Cargo's Tim Drake, and it's good to see that a lot of you are really enjoying him as well. Now with Raven, from that kind of council member Wiser Amazon was teaching her about Nevma, and that is a bunch of rocks stacked on each other, you could say, and it has existed here on the island before, well, history, before memory, and the legend is that it was built by a hero of their tribe, long forgotten now, to represent a human soul. And that was quite cool, because it's kind of trying to teach Raven in a literal sense, like how can one restructure a soul like that, and then that's why she kind of kept failing no matter how close she kept getting. She speaks of her daughter, as we briefly went over earlier, and how they tried to resurrect her because she was killed in battle, and there were many attempts to bring her back when none were successful. And when she says, so does that mean we can't bring Donna back? Well, she did say, no, I didn't say that at all. A return from death is possible. I've seen it happen, which I wonder if that's a reference to Diana coming back. But she says that she's never been sure about or how or why the process was successful. And in the case of my daughter, I became unsure as to whom I was attempting to do it for, which is quite powerful in a way, because it's like, am I bringing her back so she can live again, or is it more for me? I guess you could say Raven misses Donna and they just want to bring her back, but I think it wasn't just about that. It's not exactly like oh, I'm kind of bringing my daughter back, you know, is it because I just really want her back in a selfish way? I guess the Titans could be looking at it in that angle and how they just want their friend back. And I guess, you know, this also does lean into how, for some reason, Donna didn't want to go back, and maybe she wanted to see what was next for her in the afterlife. So I actually kind of take that back in a way, because I suppose the Titans, or at least Raven, trying to get Donna back was a little bit innocently selfish, and I think that's something anyone would go through if the possibility of resurrection was a real thing. But anyway, guys, Hank and the gang find the upside down tree. The cool thing about this, though, what I kind of do like, despite Hawk and Dove, the OG Dove, as I keep memeing about, going around the underworld in a supernatural kind of way and how they're going to help people, I do like how, just jumping to the cut here, the bridge disappeared, because it seems that the opportunity for getting out can be a thing that will present itself again and again. Maybe you just need to keep finding the tree wherever it spawns next in the underworld, because yes, I know the bridge cracked, I know the portal to Earth, so to speak, from the underworld closed, but again, it disappeared into just woods. So I like to think that Hank, when he's kind of done fulfilling his new role as helper of the underworld to the lost souls, he could probably at some point return again. I know in reality, the reason why they did what they did is because he has got his own TV show in the works, so to speak. So realistically, even though it's frustrated, and you could argue Donna could have just lassoed him on the other side, like she's got super strength, she could have just yeeted him, if we're being really blunt about it. The fact remains that Hank could locate the upside down tree again. I'm guessing the bridge will form in not a way that it's still split, and he could make it to Earth. in the future seasons if they ever wanted to continue that story beat. I'm really not saying they're going to. It's just a nice bit of headcanon for us to go out on. So as I said earlier, they get onto the bridge cracks because the ghouls and ghosts are all amounting in force. I'm not a massive fan of this just because 1 second Malcolm dies just through being touched, yet they apparently have these echo waves and they were sending them out, but it wasn't really affecting everyone the same way. If any of you watched Crisis on Infinite Earths with the parademons and how sometimes they were killed in a certain way, but then you could just poke them from other characters and they just disappeared into nothingness, it's that kind of rule of logic which just wasn't consistent in the Crisis crossover, and same with these little freaking demons here. And this all amounted to a point where, as I just mentioned with Hank, it was a nice send-off, and that Donnie got off the train God knows how long ago as well. Like, he wasn't one of those souls who just wanted to go to the next phase, and like, they are the hawk and dove of the underworld, and that's a really badass thing to imagine. Whilst I remember now, I was meant to mention this earlier, but I don't know if anyone recognized the island that Themyscira was on, and even what they were filming with in the underworld, I think, but at least Themyscira, Paradise Island, was 100% the Arrow Lianyu Island. I always recognize that kind of big rock, pebbly kind of beach that kind of goes around, and you saw the CGI temple in the background. But either way, Tim kind of wakes up, his color was coming back once again to symbolize the desaturation of no life to saturation being life. Now, as I said, I would revisit the Bruce thing towards the end. So this bit's kind of a little bit strange in a way, because I always like to think like I think I've taken everything into account, unless I'm being an idiot. Like, what am I missing here? So, if I'm not missing anything, is this kind of just weird execution, so to speak? So, Raven's packing her things up. She's kind of accepted things. Maybe I can't bring Donna back, but at least, you know, I learned some of the Amazon ways and whatnot. She goes to visit the body. Well, she kind of senses something, which is why she goes to the temple to visit the body again, and it is missing. And that's because Donna, Troy, has been resurrected, as we know. She made it through the portal, but she somehow got to Bruce. So this is where things fall apart a little bit for me, as cool as it is. So we cut to Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, as I said, I understand the situation of where his mind has taken him. I was wondering, when we first saw Bruce pouring petrol everywhere out of the petrol tank, I just thought this man is truly broken. He lit the match, and I think this will really give a bitter taste in some people's mouths, but I'm really trying to remain objective here. This broke Batman in episode 1. You all saw it. Like, whether you agree with it or not, I don't even like Batman killing, not even the Joker, but there is one story that I will always kind of allow myself to, like, at least give it a chance with if he does kill the Joker, I want to see that explored in terms of the humanity of that. And that's one thing Titans has done, to the point of where, as I was kind of mentioning, I didn't know where I landed with Bruce kind of wanting to take his own life. But clearly it's kind of been eating and eating and eating away at him, to the point of where even Batman, yes, Batman, the one thing that could maybe drive him to this point is something like this to an extent. But the one thing that made zero sense about it is that this castle wasn't on Paradise Island. I do want to bring to your attention, how do I know that? Well, I'm pretty sure freaking Bruce Wayne's lawyer wouldn't be taken to Paradise Island just to do his will and testament. So this is God knows where. How did Donna Troy get there? I thought it was quite a nice touch that they had Donna Troy save Bruce Wayne from a burning building situation, so to speak, because that's how Wonder Woman in the usual origin story for Donna Troy saves her. So it's kind of cool how she did that with Bruce. But once again, guys, she picks up Bruce, saves him, and it's just like, Donna, like, what? How does any of this make sense? I hope they clarify this, because how does it make sense? How did you know where he was? None of the other Titans knew. I'm just really trying to think about, like, how did she know? It doesn't make sense. How did she get there? I mean, thank God she did, I suppose, because Bruce is still going to be kicking. Now, on to the next part. I've got over that now. Those are my issues with that. Other than that, it's still cool. I like what happened, but as for execution, pretty sloppy. Putting that behind me, I do wonder what they're gonna do here, because the thing is, let's just assume he doesn't know that Jason is alive. I'm guessing that's the angle they're gonna go with once he learns that Jason is alive. It's like, oh, okay, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to be in the same state of mind, because the main thing that's eating away at Bruce, the very look the episode opened up with, the very look just as he lit the match, even if he finds out that Jason Todd is still alive, he's terrorizing Gotham, Scarecrow's out again, I'm guessing, as I said, the angle they're going with is that Bruce is going to be filled in with all of this. He's like, oh shit. But as I said, that's kind of besides the point. The thing that's led him to this mental state is that he bashed in and caved in the Joker's skull. So whether or not he learns that Jason is still alive, yeah, that might give him a bit of closure in one sense and how, oh, at least Jason's. But as I said, the thing that got him to this point is that he murdered, he killed, he broke his one rule. If they're going on like a path to him getting a little bit better and level-headed, I don't see how that can be achieved, because there's one thing that still remains, and that is the Joker is dead. So I would understand if the Joker somehow got brought back. I mean, maybe he would be still disgusted in himself that he murdered, but it's like, oh, well, you're still alive. But this hasn't really got much to do with Jason. I know I keep repeating myself. This is all about the fact that he killed. I'm just wondering where things are going to go from the end of this episode, other than he's going to get filled in. It just doesn't make sense to me as to why he might come around to be Batman again with Tim Drake, even though I get the angle of what they're going with and how he can do things a little bit differently this time around. Tim Drake will ground him, being the Robin that, you know, understands that Batman needs a Robin and blah, blah, blah. But the fact remains, he still is going to be eaten up by the one thing he swore he would never do. So what's changed that now? So I just hope that they don't get rid of that, because once again, the thing that's got him to the point of this episode is still established and hasn't changed. So I don't see why it would. That's the one I'm going to leave this off with. So overall, this episode had some good parts in it, and overall I enjoyed so many aspects of it, but I couldn't help but be more critical on this one, because I felt like some of the things they were setting up or the way they executed certain things weren't so sound in the ways I articulated. Now, as I've said before, usually things like this aren't a problem in of itself, or maybe if there's one or two things, but sometimes when things kind of amount up, with a few issues, kind of like the rocks that Raven was trying to rebuild, that's when it becomes a bit cumbersome on the episode. And I felt like this episode had a bit more of that than what we've seen before. Like, I enjoyed last episode more than this episode, despite getting great moments in it still. So I would love to know your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on just my general critiques, or just some of my theories and things like that? I would love for you to get into my head with what I said about some of those things. I do read every single comment, so make sure you do leave them. I do also have a top pinned comment in that comment section, which will lead you to my Twitter links, my Discord server links, and Patreon and merch store if you're interested. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Titans in the next video. Goodbye.